Well, everybody, I'm excited today because Dawn, my guest, when you see her work and you see what she does, I just see really fabulous high-end weddings and so much color, which I'm sure not everybody wants, but I'm just I know our conversation is going to be as colorful as her designs. Welcome, Dawn, to the Flower Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Well, I know that we've been emailing back and forth a little bit, and I don't know. I'm really excited to have this chat today because when I see your work, I see somebody who has the ability to really sell color, to really sell beautiful upscale weddings. And I know that your journey started a little bit later in life. And so I got to hear, how did you find your way into the world of flowers?
Well, it was a long path, I guess, for me, because I did not start my flower business until I was 45 years old, and I had already had another career for 20 years. And I was a costume designer for film and television, for becoming a florist, which was a career that definitely translates well into flowers because there's so much in terms of like texture and color and pattern, and even what we do as costume designers when we figure out what a person's personality is and we try to express it in the clothes. In a lot of ways, that's the same thing that I'm doing in a wedding, is taking their personality and expressing that through flowers. So I think there was a lot of transitional things that helped me to kind of jumpstart my floral career and go quickly in it. But when I was getting married in 2012, I was researching for my wedding. And as an artistic person, I was looking at a lot of visual imagery, and I just like fell in love with flowers. I, of course, found Ariella Shazar in that journey when I was looking, and I knew I could not afford her flowers, but I wanted something that had that incredible look to it.
She's
Uh,
amazing.
and by the end of the whole wedding journey, instead of like a lot of people at the end of their planning are like, oh my God, I never have to do that again. I was like, I want to do this again, like 300 different ways. And I had never thought about flowers as a career before that. Like it didn't really cross my mind that like I didn't go to a florist for weekly flowers, or if anybody was needed flowers, I actually did them myself always to like bring to office parties, or somebody's birthday, I would just pick up flowers at Trader Joe's and make an arrangement or something like that. But it was very never in the idea that this could be a career path for me. And it was after that that I was like, oh, there's people doing this. This is a career for people. Could I do this? Is this possible? So I reached out to a couple of florists in my area. I was in Los Angeles at the time, to see about interning with them and to see if I actually liked the business end of what it was, because that can be so different from what you think a job is going to be to what the reality of a job is.
Absolutely.
Um, so I did 3 weddings. I did one in studio with a florist. I did one on site with a planner as an assistant, and one on site with a florist as an assistant. And it was like, oh, I know what this is. This is like a film set. There's all these different people working together collaboratively to make something happen. There are tight deadlines. There are very specific times of starting. There's all the planning that goes into it so that everything is ready when it needs to be. And so that part of the business also, I think, was a very kind of easy transition. I think what was hardest in the beginning was knowing what all of the different flowers needed to be happy, right? Like how to
Right.
process different types of flowers, how long some flowers last, how long they don't last, the mechanics of what needed to be doing. It was kind of the nuts and bolts of being a florist that I was not as familiar with. That's where I really kind of needed to exert myself in the beginning. But the kind of time frame and timelines of weddings was very similar to what I had actually been doing previously. I think also the seasonality of both flowers and weddings and engagements was also something that I really had to learn in the beginning too. That was a big one also. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
kind of,
huge.
yeah, it took me a little while from when I got married in 2012. I did not start my flower journey really until 2017. So it took a little time for me to kind of percolate it as an idea and see how I could transition out of what I had been doing for a really long time. And also at the same, my husband and I had been wanting to leave Los Angeles and buy a little land somewhere and start a different kind of lifestyle. And that's when that all came together for me.
So where do you live now?
So we live in San Diego County. We're out in the mountains, kind of we're kind of like an hour from San Diego, 2 hours from LA. So it feels extremely rural where we are. We're actually surrounded by flower farms, commercial nurseries, and things like that. It's avocado groves. The area is a big producer of wax flower, eucalyptus, leucadendrums, all that kind of stuff.
So are you in that area like where the Milano farm is and
Yeah,
Kendall
really
Farms
close.
is? You're near there. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I had the opportunity to visit that area, and that's a beautiful area to be in. And
it is. It's like this
that's
little
awesome.
secret unknown part of Southern California. So I might not tell you the exact name of the town that I
That's
live
okay.
in
That's
because
okay.
we
Yeah.
want to keep it small. It's like Mayberry in Southern California. It's amazing. It's like a tiny main street and a small town atmosphere, and it's amazing.
I can appreciate that and the need to protect it. I do understand that too. So, it's so funny because, I've been in the industry for many years. And when I hear 2017, I think, well, that wasn't that long ago. But now that's like 6 years ago. And you
Six
and
years.
and you had to weather the pandemic and all of that. And I mean, what a roller coaster. What a time to start a business and
Yeah.
ramp up and stuff like that. When you started your business, did you know right from the beginning that you really wanted to focus on weddings?
Yes, actually. I did not want to shop. I didn't want to have to be anywhere at a specific time. I didn't want overhead of a shop. I didn't have money for the overhead of a shop. We had just bought our first house, and we have 5 acres, and we'd kind of maxed everything out. And then to transition from, a well-paid film industry job to like my own business was not something I was financially prepared for.
Sure.
And part of why weddings was so great is because I take a deposit in the beginning or a retainer, and I'm not purchasing product before it's paid for, right? By the time I get to the wedding, everything is completely paid for. And so it was actually, in terms of starting a new business, it was pretty low in terms of the kind of equity you had to put into it in the beginning, and the startup costs were quite low because you don't have to start with a cooler. You don't have to start with a dedicated space. There was a good portion of those first 3 years that I was figuring out the different spaces in my house that would work the best to be doing flowers. But in terms of weddings, one of the biggest things and reasons that I left the film industry, it was because I was not finding it fulfilling anymore.
Mm,
To be perfectly honest, it's not the nicest industry. There are a lot of egos that take center stage at every level of production. And I just felt like my soul was dying on the inside doing that. And it wasn't creatively as interesting as it had been when I first started as well. And one of the things I'm so passionate about, and why I'm so passionate about weddings is, and this started with my own also, is that you remember, and I've seen it with all my friends too. Like, I don't know if it's the same for guys, and maybe it might not be the most modern statement, but I know for most of my female friends, like, we remembered everything that happened on the wedding day. Like, if it was good, if it was bad, if it was amazing, if it was terrible, but like those things are seared into like our mental, space for the rest of our lives. And the thought of being able to add to somebody's wedding, to be able to make it
mm,
incredible for them this day that's already so full of emotion and love. And it's also like, it's the moment, I think, in a lot of ways when people are at like kind of their purest, most beautiful self, because like everybody, I mean, at least most of the weddings I've gotten to be a part of, people are like shining with love. You see that true spirit of a person coming through. And I just realized that that is like the kind of environment that I want to be around. And to, it's something that I foster in all of our team, as well as to like treat people with kindness, do things that make the world a better place in the way that you can. Like personally, I like, what fulfills me is working with beautiful flowers and creating these beautiful environments, and to be able to do that in a way that gives other people joy is really special to me.
Well, I think that when you look at kind of your background with costume design and things like that, you get a real sense of color, you get a real sense of texture, like you said, and drama and how to make I mean, I think that there's a lot of similarities, and it's interesting the people that I have interviewed that have not the exact background, but something similar, whether it's theater or whatever, and it really translates. It's like that creative vibe really translates.
Yeah.
But I think from a creative standpoint, sometimes some of the hardest things are okay. So how do I start? You may know how to execute it. You may know or like you said, you're learning the flowers, you're learning how to take care of them and stuff like that. In starting your business, what did you feel like was one of the bigger obstacles you had to overcome?
I think number one was the mechanics and and the timing of how pre-production for a wedding goes. I think that was a big one. And also um I think I came from a place of being a creative artist for a really long time. And so I
Sure.
think that's something that I'm quite secure in, which is not necessarily the case for a lot of other creatives. So I think being able to have other people take me seriously when being so new in the industry was probably the biggest challenge.
Mm,
And to be able to kind of um because all of the mechanics, all of the production, all those things, those are things you can learn, you can acquire, but to have kind of a brand or a reputation in the industry, and particularly in Southern California, I mean, there are so many people doing weddings and there are so many weddings. That's what's really amazing about here, but to kind of stand out and be taken seriously in the very beginning is a little challenging.
mm.
I think that was one of the largest hurdles.
And how do you feel like you really dealt with that? Because I mean, obviously you had your wedding, you had those other weddings. You could kind of show some of your work. You knew the lingo, you kind of knew the expectation. How do you feel like what was the thing that got you that through that barrier?
Well, for me, it was very much styled shoots and
Okay.
crafting and curating my own shoots. Because I didn't have anything to show for what I could do, right? When you're first starting out, you're getting very small weddings for the most part.
Mm,
And this actually really ties into also how I think you attract your ideal client.
mm,
Because if you want, you have to show the work that you want to create, right? Because that is the only, people are very visual, and particularly people who are not in the creative field, they need to see what it is, right? And say like, they don't always know that you can do many different things, many different styles. Like they need to see that image, connect to that image and say like, yes, that is what I want. And
mm.
so I
Right.
think coming from that creative background and having done already as a costume designer so many photo shoots throughout the years and working with all the creatives, and part of being a costume designer is sourcing, ordering, reaching out to press people, all those kinds of things are things that I would typically do as a costume designer. So for me, I was not intimidated to reach out to borrow a gown or to be the creative director of my own shoot rather than signing up with somebody else to say, I'll provide flowers. Like I understood from the beginning that the vision that I had for the company, and also what I needed to present so that people could see that I could do that, even if I was, very new in the industry.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really smart. And I mean, I know when you have minimal overhead, you have the opportunity to maybe spend some bucks on that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and do those styled shoots. And did you have any luck getting things published, or were you really more after just creating sort of a portfolio?
So I was super lucky. My very first styled shoot went viral all over the internet.
Oh,
It got picked
really?
up. Yeah, it got picked up by Green Wedding Shoes in 2017. It was my first photo shoot. It was my first bouquet and my first arch that I ever did. And part of the reason for me as a creative to do a styled shoot is I don't want to test something on somebody's real wedding, right? Like I want their real wedding to be perfect, for everything to go as planned, which it never ever does, but we know how to account for that. And so to like, I didn't want to show up to a wedding and never have done a bouquet, or be in production for a wedding and never have done a bouquet and never have done an arch. I didn't freelance with a bunch of designers. I really, truly freelanced 3 times before starting. And so I did it as much as to show the images as to learn it myself in terms of the mechanics and how long it takes and how many people you need and how much product you need and like all those kinds of things. It's an opportunity to express myself creatively, but it was also an opportunity to teach myself all of those different aspects of what it is, wedding floral design is, event design is like. So yeah, it got picked up. It went viral. It went viral all over the internet. It got picked up by brides and Martha Stewart and like all different kinds after Green Wedding Shoes published it. And it was very exciting. And I did have, like, within 6 months of doing that, I had brides saying, I want exactly this. I want that
Mm.
plate that you used in that shoot. I want that bouquet and those flowers. And it showed me from the very beginning just how powerful a tool that was for myself as a designer, and to make a name in the industry as well.
Well, I know I've heard it before on our podcast where people talk about, put that work out there that you want to do, not necessarily, like just because you did a wedding doesn't mean you have to publish it or you have to put it on social
Yes.
media. If you have a client that it's all hydrangea wedding, and maybe you don't really want to, you're doing it because you're paying bills, but that doesn't mean you have to put it everywhere. And and
Yes.
and this and this gives you that opportunity to put out there into the universe the work that you want to do more of. And
Exactly.
how exciting. So I don't know if you remember, but I'm curious, how much money did you spend on that first shoot?
I don't think I spent more than I think I spent less than $400.
What?
Yes. Yes. Well, in some ways, like I said, I have the advantage, right? I had a vintage gown in my closet and I added a cape to it because capes were starting to trend and I loved capes, the wedding capes. So I added a cape to it and we used that for the bride. We had the groom wear his own suit, that he sent me pictures of beforehand so I could approve. I do have bolts of fabric hanging around so I could drape something up. And then, as it turns out, we live in this flower farming area. So one of our friends farms wax. So he gave me 5 buckets of wax flour, which I used as my base for everything. And then the rest of the flowers were what I purchased from my wholesaler. But yeah, overall, I did not spend that much because in the beginning, I didn't have any money to spend on stuff. We were just trying to pay our mortgage and
Yeah.
get by and and I did zero advertising too for the same reason, because I did not have money to spend on advertising at that
Well, I
time.
want
But
to, for everybody out there whose jaw hit the ground, I want to say that in where she lives in that part of the world, flowers are cheaper because there's not as much freight associated with them. There's not box charges, there's not dredge, because a lot of these flowers are grown down in that part of the world. So you probably can stretch your dollars a little farther down there, which I think is awesome. I mean,
yeah.
what an opportunity, I
Oh yeah,
mean,
definitely.
really.
But
Uh,
you brought up a really important point, I think. And that is like, you don't have to show everything that you do. Because I will tell you, I have friends who are florists, some of them who've been doing it for a lot longer than me. And they always say, how do you get such colorful weddings? How do you always, all your clients are your ideal clients? And I say, it's because I do not put anything out that is not the kind of work that I want to attract. I don't put it on my feed. I don't put it on my website. I don't pin it to Pinterest. I only put the work that I want to do. And I may do other weddings, and they're beautiful weddings and they're what the clients wanted. And I'm so happy to make them happy. And those I will show in stories, but I'm not necessarily, they're not going to live anywhere that somebody will say, like, that's what I want. And that's why I get all those colorful weddings and how you see so much color. It's because it's so important to only put out the work you want to attract.
Well,
It's the
you've
most
done.
important thinking.
I agree, 1,000%, because so many times customers don't. I don't know. It's like they're thinking, because maybe they've never been married before or they've never been a part of a wedding before, but they tend to have very two-dimensional thinking. And to me, as a florist, as the wedding designer, you know, that is kind of our jobs. I mean, it's our jobs to take their two-dimensional, ideas and make them three-dimensional masterpieces. And I love that. I really do. You've touched on a couple things that I'm really stoked about because I want to make sure we cover some of this stuff. Um, I'm trying to figure out which comes first, the cart or the horse in this situation. So let me first, I mean, because I think these things intertwine really well, but going from starting getting smaller budget weddings to bigger budget weddings, I think is part of what we just talked about. Putting out this work that you want.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that necessarily? Do you feel the need to upsell, or just these were the kinds of clients coming to you? How did you navigate that? And I know that's also part of finding that ideal client. So I'd just really like to hear some of what you did to get there.
Yeah. I think the first 3 years, I really took every wedding that came my way that was a reasonable budget, in the sense that what they wanted was a budget that could be applied to it. Because there's a lot of times we get budgets that are not anywhere close to the reality
Right.
of of you continuing to make a living and pay your mortgage and giving flowers for a wedding, So I think those first 3 years, because I felt like I had so much to learn, and I just definitely, and there was not a giant volume of inquiries coming in. I really took every wedding, and I've never been of the mind that I only do this style. I can only do
Mm.
this one style. It's like, I think maybe this comes from costume design too. It's like I can apply my skill to whatever style it is and make what the client wants. And so I think I was able to do a lot of different types of weddings in those first 3 years, and not a huge volume either. And it wasn't really until but every year I was doing a minimum of 4 styled shoots every single year. And at all of those shoots, I was getting published. And I think one of the most important things is to not be intimidated by the process or by being told no, right? That is like, I think some people can get defeated if, like, they submit and they don't get it. Like, I think it probably comes from my background. It's like actors, they do 1,000 auditions and maybe they get one, you know so like I come from
True.
that mentality. So for me, I always start at the top of the publication list and work my way down. And I can tell you, it took me 3 years of submitting to Style Me Pretty, like I don't know how many times, and getting no's until they finally took one. I finally got one published. But I think that is the thing. It's like, if you know what it is you want and the vision of where you're going to go, don't let no's stop you. You just keep going. It's that sense of like, maybe this one didn't hit, but the next one will. And if Style Me Pretty didn't take it, somebody else will take it. It's a better fit for them. But I think understanding like who the publications are and what voice they have,
Mm.
and tailoring your submissions to that really helps with that process. But after 3 years, all of these things, I was starting to have a body of work that was having the effect of calling in those clients that I was looking for. And at the same time, I will say when I started doing weddings, I could not imagine people spending above a certain amount on flowers.
Like
Like
what?
it
Like
wasn't a
what number?
well, I mean, even like for me, 5,000 was a lot in the beginning,
Mm.
like that someone would want to, spend that much on my whole wedding costs like 10,000, my whole wedding, for 100 people. And I didn't growing up, I haven't mentioned it, but I was born on a commune in Miami. I had very hippie parents. I didn't grow up going to black tie. Okay, we did go to some black tie things, but not a lot of black tie weddings. And so it wasn't even in my own kind of experience of those
Sure.
things. And I think there's a certain, like, sometimes we can have a mental block for ourselves against what is morally acceptable to pay for something, right? And what I have realized through the process of expanding my business is that those higher end budgets give me more of an ability to express my creativity because I'm not hampered by the budget. Whereas on the lower budgets, I have to be more creative about how I use the budget, not necessarily like to achieve the look they want, because it's never in line really with what, the Pinterest vision is. So I have to be creative about the budget, not as creative about my usage of the flowers. And then
Mm.
once you get into those bigger budgets, it's like, okay, I can get all the types of flowers that I want. I can afford the slipper orchids or the gloriosa, the long stem gloriosa lilies, or a whole aisle of delphinium or whatever it might be. And so it's like it's a broader palette that I get to paint with than on the lower budgets. And I realized that for me, that is what really fuels my creativity, is to be able to have those kind of, like you said, dramatic, broad kind of strokes, and to create these immersive environments of florals, which you just don't get to do on a smaller budget because flowers are expensive, and so is labor, and so is all the overhead and all the things that go into it.
Absolutely. Well, this I can tell already. This interview is going to go by really fast, and I'm really nervous all of a sudden because I feel like you just said something that or touched on something that is gigantic. I mean, it is just gigantic, and that is the thing where the mindset of what, and I think you even said morally,
Yeah.
comfortable spending on weddings, and I feel like so many times this mindset shift, this part of what we bring to the our business is baggage. I mean, I feel like it's just really
Yeah.
it sometimes it can break a business because you can't imagine someone spending more than $150 on a bouquet. Where we all know that when they pull out that photograph of the lily of the valley bouquet, that is an expensive bouquet, and they don't know that. I mean, and it's not their fault. They're not supposed to know that, but
Of
yet,
course.
but yet, so many times we. I don't know. I feel like a lot of times I hear it. I hear it every week. I hear where people are talked out of the flowers they want, and it's packaged, well, that's really expensive. And I'm like, how do you know what somebody's willing to spend? How do you know that that's not the most, like they'd rather have that lily or that lady slipper orchid you just mentioned rather than martinis at their wedding? I mean, you don't know the priorities people have. And I don't know. I feel like that's a really big thing. And I'm really glad you said it. And I mean, how did you work your way through that? Because I know people struggle with that on every level.
Yeah.
And if you were brought up on a commune, and I don't mean to chuckle, but I mean that is one of those environments that really will put some perspective on how people spend money and what's really important because of you have that life experience. And then okay, so a $75,000 wedding, really? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just curious how you navigated that.
I think it's a process that doesn't happen overnight. But I do think we have really ingrained, like you said, mindset about and set point about what is okay to spend on something and what isn't, right? And I
Yeah.
also think it's really important to like, I am never, and I do hear some of my flower friends sometimes they get offended that like somebody wants has this price in mind and it's nowhere near the price. And it's like, but like you said, they don't know. It's not about my worth as a florist that they
Right.
think a lily of the valley bouquet should be $75. It's my job as a florist to educate them about the fact that unfortunately that does not fit into their budget. This is what a bouquet like that would cost. And this is an alternative of something that might give you the same look for less. That's my
Sure.
job as the florist, but it's never something. I think the mindset thing is the biggest thing in terms of growing your business. And I also think it's important to say, and well, maybe I won't say it right now. Maybe I'll leave this one for the end. Got to leave something for the end
All
for you,
right, so I know what that meant, and so you got to stay tuned here. I love that. I I I think one of the things that's part of this whole process too is, and you touched on this earlier. This is why you keep leaving these little breadcrumb trails. Attracting the ideal client. Um, I know you talked about the shoots, which I have more questions about that too. But what do you feel like? How do you do that?
the shoot or the ideal client.
The ideal client. How do you get those clients? Because a lot of people are. I mean, like you mentioned, there's a lot of competition out there now. And now I feel like kind of that bubble has burst just a little bit from the wedding tsunami from the pandemic. And I kind of feel like this year feels like a kind of a normal wedding season for the most part. Not all the craziness we had. And so now I think a lot of times people are trying to figure out how do we level up our business? How, if we want more big, if we want bigger weddings, how do we do that? How do we attract those clients?
Well, it's going to sound a little woo woo, but I did say I grew up on a commune. So you got to expect there's going to be a little woo in there.
We'll give you permission to woo.
Okay. I think you got to put it out there in the universe. I think you have to say it to yourself. I think you have to start to become comfortable with money and
Mhm.
with people spending lots of money. And you have to not, we have these conversations in our own heads about what is right, what's enough, what isn't enough, and you kind of have to release that to be able to to be in the mindset. I know it's super woo that attracts those clients. I mean, first you have to do the work. You have to make content that shows the work that you want to do. And you have to consistently put that content out, and you got to get it out to as many people as you possibly can. So that means getting publications. If you're not able to get publications, then you are putting it on your own Instagram feed. You are pinning your own work to Pinterest so that people can find it and so that your images are showing up in someone's mood board, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have all these different channels now for getting our work out there, and so many of them are free, which is like amazing, right? That was not available to florists in days of yesteryear, days gone by. And now it's like, yes, there's all this competition, but there's always, it's about that. It's a mentality of limitation to think that just because somebody else is doing it, I can't also do it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
There's
Yes.
always room for more people. There's always people getting married. There's weddings of every type, or whatever kind of floral work it is you want to do. But I think that mentality, and I will tell you, this is going to sound strange, but I started to say in my head and out loud to my assistant, I want to book a $75,000 wedding for flowers, $75,000 flower budget. This year we're going to do a 75,000. I kid you not, I said it over and over. And a month after I started saying it, we received an inquiry, not from a planner, from a bride on our website. And where it says, please state your budget, was 75,000. And my assistant, who goes through all of our inquiries, almost lost it. It was like, I don't know if they put an extra zero, but there it is. You have to make space for the things that you want to come in. And part of that making space is not setting up limitations for yourself. Like, the world out there is always going to give you limitations and put limitations in front of you. But inside yourself, you have to break free from that to be able to say, like, actually anything is possible, and put the energy into those things that create that to come to you, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, and I feel like too, I'm really glad you just said what you said. The world does puts these things on us enough, right? Or why do we why do we do it to ourselves? I don't understand. It's like
Yeah.
there's enough either negativity, or there's enough comparison, or we don't need to add to that. I think we just really undermine ourselves. I mean, I do it. I mean, it's so funny. Every now and then we'll talk about this, and it's like, well, when podcasts first came out, or not first came out, when we first came out 5 years ago, there was maybe 5 or 6 podcasts, and we were all a little different, and now there's like a million podcasts, and you kind of think, oh gosh, and it's kind of like, what, it's okay. That just means there's more people going to listen to podcasts, and that just
Yeah.
means there's more people who are going to we have the opportunity to get in front of more people, and to help share stories like yours to help people, which is, really, one of the, my motivations is to help people through things like this, because you just feel like so many times, I know we were talking about this before we started recording, and that is, people feel alone, people feel overwhelmed, people feel discouraged, and they're banging their head against the wall, or they just feel like they can't go another step. And it's like, you know, sometimes I think, I mean, you were very um, resourceful. You looked at what do you have access to, and I think you were smart that you didn't have to partner with a lot of people for some of your shoots. But if you don't have a vintage wedding dress hanging in your closet, maybe it would be okay to partner with a brand or somebody else that has
And
something
it
like
always
that.
is. Yeah. And I do
Um,
now for sure. Always.
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that really helps kind of bring more clout to the, with all these magazines and all these publications out there now, blogs, everybody, I think it adds more clout to have more tags, more things to connect with, and
Absolutely.
and it creates more SEO, which is a selling point, I think. I'm curious too, when I keep like I'm hopping all over the place, but this is your fault, so it's okay. So, but like when you're doing these shoots, do you choose a photographer based on some of this? Because I know, having been involved in magazine work before, that having a photographer sometimes gives you access to some of these publications.
Absolutely.
Is that, how do you navigate that, or how do you get that photographer to be on your team?
Well, I think that is a really important point, actually. I think that is the most important point, because we can create these incredible things, these incredible flowers, the scenes, whatever. And if they're not photographed in a way that that promotes our brand and the image that we want to do,
Sure.
then it's not going to be useful for us, right? And so I think it's really important, so the photographer is like one of the most important things about the shoot. Because I have done one or two shoots where I went with a photographer that somebody else suggested that had huge following perhaps, but actually their style did not align with my style. And
Mm,
also their audience didn't align with the audience that I wanted to attract. And once those shoots were over, I could see that from the photography. And that was at the very beginning, maybe the first or second year, that I was like, oh, okay, I got to get photos that are this style of photography. That's what corresponds to the type of client that I want and to what I like to look at as well. And so I think photography is the most important thing. And in the same as publications, what my game plan is always start at the top with like my most like, oh, if I could get that photographer, that would be amazing. And they're probably going to write back and be like, oh, so sorry, I'm booked. But you know, you always start. For me, I never like to work at the bottom and work my way up. I like to start from the top and work my way down. Let gravity help you, right? Don't go the
love that.
path
Yeah.
that is like the least resistance. And it's okay when they say no. And you know what? I reached out to some real big fine art photographers. I mean, not Jose Villa, not that big, but not that far underneath. And they were all like, no, 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 no. And I was like, okay, I got to find somebody who has a similar style, but maybe has not gotten to that level yet. And then I started to get yeses. And part of exciting the photographer, because the photographer
Mm,
is a visual person also, is to
sure.
make a really beautiful mood board, right? I mean, I think the really important thing about a styled shoot is, for me, is to come to it with something that it has either not been seen before. I mean, everything has always been done, but you can put your own creative spin on it, right? Whether it's a color combination or an interesting flower pairing or the way the flowers are displayed or whatever it might be. The whole purpose of a shoot, an inspirational shoot, is to provide inspiration for like the people, the couples who are looking to it, you know? So you have to come up with a concept that is going to be interesting and different and new. And also what publications are looking for are details, right? Because people want ideas when they go to Pinterest of like, well, what kind of different escort card display can I do? Or different place setting? Or so it's not just about like, I'm going to make some pretty flowers, but let me come up with a whole concept that's going to be innovative or different or interesting. And then lining up those people to make that happen. And being okay with no's. There's going to be so many no's, and you just got to keep pushing forward, you know, I
Yeah.
think.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad that you are encouraging people to aim high and manage your expectations, because sometimes we we're so nervous, or we're so scared. I guess that's the only word I can think of, that
Yeah.
we try to target the person we know we're going to get the yes from, right?
Yeah.
And because then we can feel good about that and all that. But flowers are a different beast to to photograph.
Yeah.
And if you're doing people with flowers, that can be challenging. But I feel like, if especially doing a styled shoot, now you may have models, or you may have people in there like you mentioned, which are important. But the whole idea is showing the floral work and in the right setting, and you're trying to instill that. What is it they say, like when you go to buy or you sell a house, you go to sell a house, like they want you
Yeah.
to take away all these certain objects, because you want people to imagine their belongings in the house, not see yours and then run.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of times, it's just, I don't know, it's just important to have the right kind of photographer, and to look at their work, and like, do they really highlight flowers? Do they really get it? Um,
What's their editing process like?
oh
Like,
yeah.
because there's a really big movement and trend in very sepia toned photography, which does not highlight flowers at all. Because it's, for me, like personally, I'm so about the color and the color combinations. and I will obsess over nuances of like tones together with each other. And if you do that and then you have a photographer who's very dark and moody, like none of that is going to be seen, you know? So I think educating yourself, and I think this is important on every level for a florist. It's not just about what we are doing singularly. We work
Mm.
collaboratively with all these other creatives. So to
Right.
educate yourself about different styles of photography, and also to understand, like, to critically look at those different publications. If you're wanting to attract your ideal client, you need to know who that ideal client is and where they go for their inspiration,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
then you can kind of understand what it is they're going to want to see for them to be able to relate to you as a florist who can fulfill their dream flowers or their dream wedding style, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I know before we started, I asked you the question, what is your superpower? And I always love to ask that question because sometimes I don't know the question to ask. And sometimes there's like this little, your talent or this huge gift you have, and I don't know to ask about it. And that was one of the things you were talking about is being able to spend that, I think you said hour with your client on the phone or wherever. I don't know, maybe do you do it
I
on the
just do it on the
phone?
phone, not even a
Really?
Zoom call, but a phone call. Yeah.
Wow, that's hard. I mean, because we're so visual. How do you even do that? I don't
Well,
understand.
before we do that call, they have to send me a link to their Pinterest board or to whatever is inspiring them in terms of stuff. And then during that call, I will very thoroughly go through the visual information with them and ask them, because also we can look at the same image, both of us, and see different things in it and like
Yeah,
it for different things.
yeah,
So even though sometimes I'll be sent an incredibly detailed, Pinterest board that has a very clear vision, and sometimes I'm sent Pinterest board that is like, you can see they started here, then they went there, and their vision evolved. Or sometimes it's just all over the place and they're like, there's nothing cohesive at all. So during that time, I will, with a lot of in-depth questions, ask them, go through images, talk about what they like. But really, I always start from a place of emotion. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of like what flowers you like, what's in season, what colors, any of that, I want to know, when you and your guests walk into the wedding, what do you want to feel? What do you want to evoke? What emotional response do you want to evoke? Because from there, from that abstract place, I can get there in flowers. But that's the first thing I need to know. Are you relaxed and casual, or are you formal and you want a feeling of opulence? Like, there's so many different layers and levels and so many things we can do. And to me, that is really the beauty of flowers, is that they have the ability to evoke emotion. Like, just looking at a flower, and some flowers, you look at them and you can't help but smile. They just bring so much joy.
yes.
And so we can paint in a way, we can craft an environment that is emotional with the flowers that we use. And I think that's like really the true power of like what flowers do, and what they bring to a wedding, and what makes it like almost magical and special.
So I kind of want to take a second and talk some examples
Okay.
because I know I've had guests in the past not say the same thing exactly, but say a similar thing. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity because if somebody comes out and say they're casual, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like if they're casual and laid back, they got the budget, but they're trying to evoke those kinds of feelings and emotions. This is a test time. I'm going to see like kind of walk us through that process. Like, what do you then begin? And I know this is a much bigger, broader, you know, subject to bring into a specific thing at the last second, but I maybe you get the idea. I'm just trying to kind of figure out how you navigate that. How do you like? I don't know how to ask my question.
Yeah. Well, I think that you can do it in a variety of ways. I think you can do it in flower choice, number one, in color palette, in structure of the flowers, and and then adding on to that layers in terms of the decor that you're bringing to it as well, right? So for me, for example, I might have a client with a very healthy budget, and they are casual and not not traditional, and they want guests just to feel like welcome and was relaxed, that they don't want it to feel like a very formal affair. So for that, I'm going to bring in things like that are more evocative of wild flowers. We're going to do arrangements that look like they're growing, not that they've been formally arranged. The structure on everything is going to be loose, and it's going to be whimsical, and there's going to be lots of light and airy things that are going to come up. And it could be in a variety of color palettes, but I think structurally and flower choices, they're flowers that are soft, they're delicate, they have a relaxed feeling themselves, right?
Sure.
And then as opposed to a client who might have the same budget, but they want it to feel opulent. They want people to walk in and to gasp, and they want, drama, and they want it to feel, I mean, actually, one of my favorite things is that like a high percentage of my clients say they want flowers that look like they came out of an Italian Renaissance painting, which is just like, that is what I've been trying for. Those are my favorites to do. And yes, I can give that to you. But what does that mean? That means that I'm going to use more roses. I'm going to use more flowers that are have more structure to them themselves. I'm going to use vessels that are footed, that are maybe in metals or in stone, as opposed to a modern clay vessel or something like that. So I think
Sure.
you can bring in those different emotions, and then the installations are going to be maybe more opulent, really dramatic in terms of like cascades off of, fireplace mantles or whatever it might be. It's like, it's a different feeling, and it's right down to the flowers themselves. You're not going, I think the one thing that might be frustrating in terms of budget and feeling is that, like, no, I cannot get the exact same look with cheaper flowers. I can't, different flowers have different structure. They have different textures. They have different styles. And so you need certain things to achieve, a certain look
Sure.
sometimes.
Sure.
Does
Yeah,
that
that's a good
answer the
point.
question a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. And I know that because I'm thinking about different times like where if somebody's starting out and they're trying to understand well, one thing I know, let me back up. One thing I know is a lot of times also people are limited to what they're offered depending on the part of the country they live in.
Yeah.
If you're in New York City, if you're near LA, if you're near San Francisco, I'm going to say Nashville
Definitely.
because, I bring in a lot of cool flowers. But I'm saying, there's flowers there that maybe you don't just see at every,
Market.
website, market, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really hard to visualize, okay, what does that, what is that going to look like? And if you're limited on some of those things, it's hard to elevate those looks. I think
Well,
your point to color and texture though is definitely right on. I mean, I feel like that's important.
yeah. And I think one thing I did for myself in the beginning,
Hmm.
when I didn't know lots of flower names and I didn't know, what, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of flowers,
Right,
takes
right.
a long time to learn them and know the different colors. And I would, go onto Mayesh's website,
Hmm.
and in their flower library, I would screenshot and I would make little collages for myself. Do these flowers look good together? Do I want these colors together? Do I want those colors together? I really I put in the extra time and effort for myself to be able to achieve a level of design that would elevate my work and get those clients who were looking for that kind of thing. And I think the tools are out there. You might just have to dig a little deeper,
Mm.
and it depends on what you want from the business as well, you
Oh,
know.
good point. Yeah, yeah.
So it kind of, not everybody wants to do huge weddings, and they're a different beast altogether. It takes a huge team. If I am so glad that in the first 3 years of my business, I did not get those kinds of inquiries, because it would have been terrifying to go into those and not have all the knowledge that I acquired, up until that point. And I think that it's back to a little bit of that woo, like we get the things as we are ready for them, even if like part of us is saying like, oh, why isn't it coming, it's not coming fast enough, like I want it now. At the same time, it's like you do need to acquire the skills so that when you do get to that wedding where it's a 75K budget, you know how to handle the money, you know how much time you need to prep for it, the ordering of it. I mean, I can spend a whole month ordering for a wedding that size,
Oh,
like
I believe it.
40 hours a week, knowing how many crew you need, how to get a 30-foot refrigerated truck and a driver to drive it. And, all of those, how the hard goods, the carts for the hard goods, the logistics of the timing, and like all of those things are so much more involved in a wedding of that size. And the expectations are higher of what you're going to provide as a vendor as well. Like excellence is expected. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Yes, some
absolutely.
flower might die. Yes, something might not come in the color, whatever. But at the end of the day, what you've had in that proposal needs to be what is presented to the client, And I think if you get to that without having enough of the educational process of doing the jobs that take you to that point, it would be very uncomfortable. Like I remember my first, 5,000 budget, and those came pretty fast, like within the second year that I was working, and I was very comfortable with it. But there was also that feeling like, I've never done this before, I've never done that before, I've never done, and like, I mean, practically every wedding I wanted to hurl before a wedding, because it was like, stage fright, like, oh my God, is it all gonna work? Is everything stay alive? Is it gonna stay on? Is it, gonna live? All of those things. And it's like, all of those things are so exponentially larger when you're dealing with really big budgets, that had I had to face that amount of pressure earlier on, I think it would have been very uncomfortable. And I don't know that I would have performed, to the same level that I'm capable of now.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like a lot of times too, it's harder to build your reputation, but it's not very hard to ruin it. And you don't want to be working with wedding planners, photographers, all these people, and have this huge disaster happen.
Yeah.
I also think that it's really easy to have a big budget and at the end of it not make much money because you weren't really sure how to delegate these funds for this or funds for that, or how to plan that. So crawling before you run I totally see the benefits in that. And I don't, we always just compare ourselves with the people that have been doing it for 10 years. I mean, we compare ourselves to the people that have everything polished and perfect, and and then we're like, we want to be there now.
Yeah.
But we don't realize all the blood, sweat, equity, everything they poured into themselves, like you have, which I appreciate and admire, that that has gotten them to this point, or have gotten you to this point, because you spent a lot of time. A lot of times people don't realize that the money you invested in those styled shoots and continue to is investing in you. You're investing in your portfolios. You're investing in your business. It's an investment that can transcend lots of levels of what you're trying to do. And
Yeah.
I just feel like that's one of the things that a lot of people, like I knew a lot of people in Atlanta that were always trying to do styled shoots, and I felt like there was some challenges with that. Like they were having a hard time getting published, or they'd spend all this money and then they felt like the doors were just shutting in their face. And I don't know, now that a lot of magazines, I mean, who would have thought, Martha Stewart's magazine would be have a final issue last
I
year.
know,
I
so
mean,
sad.
who would have thought that? But I'm just saying, a lot of those kinds of publications have kind of whittled away, but there's other opportunities for publications to be published. And
Absolutely.
and we've had to rethink how we do that. I don't know. I'm really encouraged by what you've said, and I feel like a lot of people, um, I hope, really take away from this that it doesn't matter where you are and who you are. That you're worth investing in, and invest in
Yeah.
yourself and in your business. And I really appreciate you saying all that. I can't believe we're here, but it's that time to
Yeah.
ask the
Yes.
advice question, what we've all been waiting for. And I know what, like, I'm just curious if you've got something that you would love to share with our listeners that maybe has been a lot to you, or is just something you've learned along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I have so much advice to give, but I think one of the things that's really important and what you just touched on, two, I guess I'm so bad at one thing. So it's going to be
It's
two
okay.
things.
It's
Okay.
buy one get. We're doing BOGO today, so go
Okay.
ahead.
Perfect. I'm all about, my husband calls me Mo Flowers. It's all about more.
Yeah.
Um, so I think one of the things is understanding and accepting where you are in the journey and not comparing yourself to those people who are years down the path. And I know personally, I did that all the time, from the very beginning. Like, why am I not Ariella Shazar right now? I just picked up a daisy from Trader Joe's. I don't know. It's like, you have to accept that you're on a journey too, right? And that it's okay to be wherever you are in that journey. And at each step of the way, we're all doing our best in that place. And it's so hard with social media and Pinterest and everything everywhere to not compare ourselves constantly to what somebody else is doing. But like you just said, and I've heard other people say it on your show too, is that, like, you're not seeing their whole path. You're only seeing one place in their timeline, and you have no idea what happened before that for them to get to that place, and we just have to be gentle with ourselves. Like,
Yes.
strive for excellence in everything you do. I'm a firm believer of that, but also be gentle with yourself of, like, where you are in the moment. I think that's one of the biggest things, and something I struggle with and still have to tell myself all the time. And then the other thing, and this is the thing that I think is so important, is that the flower industry, the flower world, has so many places, so many different businesses that you can do, right? You can have a shop, you can have a pop-up, you can have a flower cart, you can do weddings and events, you can do brand activations, you can do subscriptions from a flower farm. Like, there are literally probably hundreds of different ways that people can have a floral business. And I think one of the most important things is to ask yourself, and we don't always do this when we go into a business when we're at the beginning of our path, but ask yourself, what is fulfilling to me to do, right? What is the
Yes.
life that I want to live? And how do I craft my business to be able to give me that life, as opposed to crafting the business and figuring out your life around it? And which I'm totally guilty of, by the way. That's why I'm saying it as advice. I wish someone would have told me,
Right. No, it's
you
good.
know? And it's like, there's all that place. It's not necessarily comfortable for every florist to be doing weddings that have 75K budgets. It may sound amazing, but it entails, teams of 10 to 15 people, crazy logistics. Really, you're not doing much floral design. You might do one example of each style of arrangement if you have the time for that. You're really administrating at that point, creating a
True.
creative vision and administrating other creatives and executing it, right? So that doesn't give everybody satisfaction. So it's like, let's not judge ourselves against what other people are doing, but find in ourselves, what's the thing that makes me happy in flowers? Do I want to, this is my other dream, grow edible flowers and create craft cocktails from those flowers? Yes, that makes me happy. When I'm ready for a slower pace, I'm going to slide into that side of it. But, there's nobody but you is deciding what your business is going to be. You know, you might think that these things are causing it to be this, or this is causing it to be this. And obviously, we're always going to have outside influences that dictate some of the choices that we have to make, whether
Right.
that's money, living situation, where you live in the world, what the budgets are, whatever it might be. But keep the vision of what you want your business to be and what you want your life to look like foremost. And keep that goal in mind as you move through the flower journey. I think there's room for everybody in all different kinds of businesses. So look inside first instead of looking outside how other people are looking at you. I think that's the thing I really want people to take away.
Wow. Well, what a note to end on. And I think I want you to be my new best friend. And
We'll talk flowers all the time.
I know. And Dawn, thank you. Thank you so much. And this is the exact episode we need right now. And I appreciate that
Oh,
so much.
thank you, Scott. Thank you, because I want you to know, like, every time I'm in the studio, I'm listening to your podcast. I'm wishing there were more episodes so I didn't have to listen to something else. Like, you get me through so many long
Oh,
work
thank you.
days and I love what you're doing and what you're doing for the flower industry and all the amazing people in the different parts of the industry that you interview. It's awesome. It's expanding our world. So thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.